Do y'all want to save money? I want to save money. But the big question is, does the garden actually save you money? So let's walk through 10 common vegetables that you can grow in your garden that will save you money. Number 10 on our list is right behind my shoulder here, and that is garlic. Garlic is probably going to be one of the more controversial in terms of whether it actually saves you money or not, because you really have to be a garlic lover to make money on your garlic. We eat garlic every single day. Every single meal, breakfast, lunch, dinner, there's garlic in it. We use minced garlic, garlic powder, and actual whole garlic. And because of that, it makes sense for me to grow my own garlic. Another thing that can help reduce the expense of garlic is if you save your own seed. Garlic is not actually grown from a physical seed like what we're used to with other garden plants. It's actually grown from your previous year's harvest. So if you harvest ahead, break the cloves into, their individual cloves and plant each one of the cloves, you're going to get a new head of garlic from that clove. So if you're saving your own seed or head of garlic, you can definitely make money. Now, some ways that it doesn't make sense is if you do have to buy the seed garlic. If you buy the seed garlic, I just looked it up because I couldn't remember how much they were when I had bought them a couple years ago, but they were $10 a head of garlic. $10 for a head of garlic. In the grocery store, we can now get it for 69 cents a head. But if you want a specific variety, if you want to make sure that the seed stock or the head of the garlic has made sure that it doesn't have disease or anything that could inhibit or hurt the plants later on, you do want to kind of start with that seed garlic, and you want to replenish with seed garlic every few years just to make sure that your stock stays nice and clean. But if you have to do it every single year, you'd have to grow a lot of it, and you'd have to really use it a lot for it to make sense. So that's why this guy is number 10. Number 9 on our list are these little guys right here, and these are cucumbers. Cucumbers are going for 89 cents each in the grocery store right now. One of these plants, I have 4 plants right here. One should produce between 10 and 20 cucumbers depending on the variety. These guys are bush style, so they are going to produce a little bit less. If you were to go with a vining style, they're going to produce a little bit more. So something to keep in mind. The cost of these cucumbers are just the seed, and I get these seeds from my gardener. His seeds, I believe, are $2 a pack, and then you get free shipping if you buy so many seeds. So when I bought this pack, I think there was somewhere between 20 and 30 seeds in it. I've used 4. So $2 for these 4, and I will be able to grow cucumbers for probably the next 3 or 4 or 5 years, especially if I only do this small amount. And it's going to cover all of my fresh cucumber needs as well as all of our pickles. So we don't buy pickles anymore because we grow our own cucumbers. Y'all, I'm so excited. These are my peppers. I've missed peppers so much. So peppers is on the list at number 8. And the only reason it made it to number 8, because it really should be higher, is because I went with the cheapest pepper that you could buy, which is a green bell pepper. Green bell peppers go for 89 cents each. But if you wanted a red bell pepper, they're going for $1.69 a pepper. And then the cost of things that are more unique, like the cayennes, maybe the pimentos, those kinds of peppers that you don't necessarily see every day, those are even more expensive. But just looking at a green bell pepper for 89 cents, each one of these plants, and I have probably, I believe, like 20 different pepper plants in the garden this year, hot and sweet peppers. I have 20 different plants. Each plant should supply me between 5 and 10 peppers per plant, if not more. Like this guy right here, I can already see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I can see 10 peppers on here already, and it's just a baby. This will be its first round, and it's going to do another flowering session and push out another round. But at the very least, if it produces 5 peppers, the plant has paid for itself. These are 20 different peppers I'm growing because I'm testing out which peppers I want to use in the future in my garden. And each one of these seeds were between $2 and $4 a packet for seeds. But there's so many seeds in there that I will be able to grow whichever one turns out to be my favorite over and over and over for years before I have to buy another seed packet. Now I know that there's going to be some folks that are going to say, well, what about all the setup, right? I have raised beds, there's soil in it, I have an automation watering system. Well, guys, I did a whole video on the return on investment for setting up a brand new garden, whether it's a raised bed, a green stalk, a container garden, or in-ground. And it shows you the exact return on investment for each one of all the setups. So make sure to check that out. I'm going to put that at the end of this video so you can see that. So that kind of takes into account how much it's going to cost just to get the return on investment of all the infrastructure. But if you have the infrastructure in place and you have all those things, the only thing you're paying for is seeds and fertilizer and possibly water. We're on a well, so we don't pay for water. You could collect rainwater, that will reduce the expense. You can make your own compost, that will reduce the expense. There's lots of ways to reduce the cost of gardening. Number 7 on our list are right here. You could probably barely see them, but those are sweet potatoes. I'm so excited about these. I just put these in the ground so that they can start producing slips. This is actually how I do it. It's the easiest way for me. I know some people like to put them in water. It's all up to you. They're going to produce slips either way. But I like to just lay them on their side halfway in the ground in the garden bed that's kind of out of the way. They'll produce slips 4 months like this. But the cool thing, sweet potatoes in the grocery store cost about 89 cents each. One of these potatoes, which you can buy at a grocery store as long as they're organic, the organic is going to cost a little bit more, but as long as you buy one sweet potato from the grocery store, put it on its side and put it in the garden, it will produce between 10 and 30 slips. And slips are the little vining plants that come off the sweet potato. You break that slip off and that becomes a plant. You put that in the ground in 1 square foot of garden space, and it should produce between 4 and 6 sweet potatoes. So from one sweet potato, you can get, let's conservatively say, 10 slips. And from each sweet potato plant or slip, you can get 4 sweet potatoes. So you can get 40 sweet potatoes for the cost of 1. This one is definitely a money-saving crop, especially down here in the South where I live in Florida, where it stays nice and hot for a long period of time, which is the ideal environment for a sweet potato. This guy right here, he's not looking too hot these days because we are definitely coming out of our winter months. We are full in spring now. And down here in Florida, that means in March, our kales start to pitter out. It's still producing lovely leaves and it still tastes good. Now, kale in the grocery store costs $1.29 a bunch. And I had to research, what does a bunch mean? A bunch is generally around 5 to 7 ounces. Which is not a lot. It's not a lot. It's like a bouquet, if you think of it, like those little bouquets at Publix. That's about what a kale bunch is about a bouquet of flowers. So at $1.29, how many bouquets or bunches can I get off of one kale plant? It's pretty ridiculous. I actually grow 2 kale plants every year, and it is all the kale we will ever need for the entire year. I freeze dry it, I freeze it, I eat it fresh, we bake it, we make kale chips. We do all the things with kale, and these 2 plants way outperformed what we ever needed for kale. Now mind you, once again, we're talking seeds. These grow from seeds. Or you can also even buy transplants. I think this is one of the few that I'm going to mention where if you buy them as transplants, you're still going to be making money. So if you bought this kale as a transplant, you're probably going to be spending between $5 and $6. But you're going to get so many bunches. All you need is 5 bunches before you're already outpacing the cost of what it costs in the grocery store. But if you buy it as a seed, whoo, the seed packets are between $2 and $4, and they have like 100 seeds. And if you only need 2 plants a year, it's gonna last you for like 10 years. And the seeds do hold up rather well. But what I like to do is, this is gonna start bolting soon. I'm gonna let it go ahead and bolt, and I'm gonna save the seed from this kale plant. It's done so well. It's done better than its little friend over here. This one has done exceptionally well. So I'm gonna save the seed from this one, and then I have seeds for eternity because I can always keep growing the plant from the seed and save the seed from the next plant. It becomes acclimated to our climate, as well as the fact that I will never have to pay for seeds again. So we made it to number 5, and I just harvested it all this morning. I wish I would have thought like leave it in the ground until I got a chance to talk to you guys, but that is this right here. And this is all the different kinds of lettuce I grew this year. Lettuce goes for around $3.79 for those bagged or fancy boxed lettuces. $3.79 for 9 ounces. It's not even a pound. You can get them a little bit cheaper if you go with the iceberg mixes or if you buy a whole head, especially if you buy those whole heads that come loose, so not in any kind of packaging. They're usually in the part of Publix or Winn-Dixie where they're kind of spraying them lightly and gently with water, and they're an entire head and you have to cut it up and wash it and everything yourself. Those are a little bit more economical, but still, lettuce is incredibly expensive. I just pulled up out of an entire bucket. This is a 5-gallon bucket. It is filled to the rim with lettuce. And this was all the stuff from previous cuts. This was the last bit of stuff that was needed to come out of the garden. It really was like, it looked kind of like it was starting to bolt. I checked each one of them. I ate each one of them before I pulled them out. And they all still taste really good, but it's time to get them out of the garden because, like I said, winter is almost over. But at lettuce going for $3.79, this is very similar to that romaine, but with an even bigger cost savings here because the romaine is cheaper when you buy it by the bunch and the lettuce is so expensive. And let's not even get into the fact that there are always so many recalls on bagged lettuces. So many. I mean, I can think of a bunch of times over the last year or two that lettuce has been unavailable or it's been recalled because of listeria or salmonella or whatever. You could grow in your backyard. You don't have to worry about any of that. There was a point in time when it was completely out of the store. There wasn't iceberg, romaine, butter. There was nothing, not even the whole heads in the store. It was completely empty. 4 weeks. And I was the one supplying lettuce for my family because I was growing it in my backyard and my family's a big salad eater. So in terms of cost though, this kind of follows the same situation as the kale. Although I would say that it doesn't make a lot of sense to buy them as transplants because lettuce, while yes it is it's very productive and you can use it cut and coming in method where you just take a little bit of the leaves around the outside and leave the center there and it will regrow. All of those things make it more economical, but a transplant, paying $5 for one when it only produces so much per plant as opposed to the kale that will produce an abundant amount. That's why I would say that you definitely want to start from either 6-cell packs where they're $1 a piece or from seed. And I absolutely love seed. My favorite seeds right now for lettuce is Salanova and Heatwave. Those two are outstanding and they don't bolt and they stay really crunchy. And those seeds tend to be a little bit more expensive, but I just figured out, as one of our viewers on the channel told me, they're open pollinated. So I can save the seed. I thought they were hybrid. And I took their advice and I went and looked it up and I'm like, oh my gosh, you're right. I have 2 plants in the garden that are staying and they are going to produce seed for me so that the cost of these Salanova seeds, I can bring that down. But even at their current cost, which I believe is about, I have to go back and look at it, somewhere between $5 and $6 for a pack of seeds. And the seed count is very low. It's like 20 to 25 and then they pelletize their seeds. So, you know, whether you like pelletized, I like pelletized seeds, but if I were to actually just be able to create all my own seeds, if I were to save my own seeds, all of that makes it less expensive. And even if you did pay $5 or $6 for 25 plants, you're going to get a ridiculous amount of lettuce. You should be able to harvest between 3 and 4 times off of it if you're using that cut and come again method. That's why this guy is number 5. Before we jump into number 4, do me a favor, guys, go down and hit that follow button. Make sure to hit notifications so you get an update whenever I put out a new video so that you can get all the tips and tricks of how to save money in your garden. Number 4 happens to be the most popular plant in the garden, and that is tomatoes. It is by far the #1 plant that every gardener wants to grow in their garden. Some people maybe not, but it is really popular out there in the gardening community. Now, tomatoes in the grocery store go for $3.99 per 10 ounce. And I'm talking about cherry tomatoes. The larger slicers are generally a little bit cheaper. Anything that's in a package is always going to be more expensive. But the cherry tomatoes, those are the most expensive. They are crazy expensive at $3.79, or sorry, at $3.99 for 10 ounces. If you bought a beefsteak, you're probably looking at like $1.50, $2 a pound. Well, these plants, I got most of them from seed from MI Gardener. I also got some from Tomato Fest, because just like the peppers, I wanted to grow a bunch of different kinds. I have 16 different kinds that I'm growing in my garden this year to determine which one is my favorite beefsteak and which one is my favorite paste tomato. I'm also trying out a couple cool currant and cherry tomatoes I've never grown before. These plants should produce between 10 and 30 pounds of tomatoes per plant. It's going to vary. So the cherries, certain cherry tomatoes will produce a lot, whereas the beefsteaks are just going to have a larger tomato but less tomatoes on the plants. And depending on how long I can get them to grow through spring and into summer will depend on how much fruit I can get from these plants. But even at the conservative side, 10 pounds of fruit per plant, when I got these seeds for $2 to $4 a piece, definitely one. Definitely a money-saving crop. Now, if you don't want to start from seeds, because I know tomatoes and even the peppers we talked about earlier can be a little challenging to start from seeds, this is one of those where it does make sense to buy them as transplants. You can still make a good profit on a tomato plant if you buy them as a transplant. A little hint here, when you're going to buy a transplant from the nursery and you're looking through that little group of plants to pick which one looks the healthiest, instead of looking for which one looks the most healthy, look for the one that accidentally got 2 seeds in it. So when you see the little container and you see 2 stems coming out of the ground or out of the container soil, that means they accidentally seeded. And if they accidentally seeded too many, you can separate that plant when you get home and you get 2 plants for the price of 1. So instead of going after the healthiest or the tallest or the strongest, go after the one that actually has 2 stems. We're working our way down the list. We're on number 3. We got 2 more to number 1. And the number 3 is money-saving crop, which is herbs. And you're probably thinking, Patrina, that should be number 1. I agree with you, but there are 2 other plants that I think actually beat herbs, which is crazy. Herbs are so good from a money-saving crop. Herbs are in the store $2.69 per half an ounce. So not even a whole ounce, half an ounce. An ounce is probably about that much of this parsley. It is a tiny amount of herbs. So for $2.69, you can get a half ounce. Now these are again one of the vegetables that I would say, well, herbs that I would say that you can buy a transplant. I bought this transplant, this parsley, this curly parsley as a transplant. It's almost 3 years now. This plant has been going. It's about 2.5 years old now. And it has produced all the parsley that I will ever want. I grow another type of parsley, but that's mainly for the butterflies. This is the one we eat. And it regrows all the time, all year round. I take all my parsley from this, I dry it, I freeze dry it, I dehydrate it, I save it. This is what we eat. This is what I make my seasonal mix from. I also have all the herbs that I use to make my teas. We have the herbs for Thanksgiving, like rosemary and sage. I have specialty herbs like cranberry hibiscus would maybe be considered a leafy, but it has good herbals. I have sorrel right here. All of these are perennials. They will grow over and over and over, and they are so expensive in the grocery store, or you can't find them in the grocery store. These guys make the top list. They will regrow every year. You only have one time that you have to pay for them. They can make their own seed, and you can save the seed and create more plants. You can take cuttings from them, which is just grabbing a stem like this, sticking it in a pot, and it will create a whole nother plant from this. This is by far one of the best money-saving crops, and that's why it made number 3. Number 2 on our list is one of these guys right here. This is a peach tree. You can see the peaches right starting to come in. They're so cute. But not just peaches. You can do peaches, avocados, mangoes, strawberries, blueberries, blackberries, plums, loquats, lychee, ice cream bean. Like, I could go on for days talking about all the different fruit trees that you can grow. And fruit trees or fruit bushes produce like crazy. Now, there is one downside, well, two downsides really. The cost of the tree initially is always going to be higher than the cost of a transplant of a vegetable. So some of the trees that I got for $10, and other ones I paid $150 for. So the more unique the tree, the larger the tree, the older the tree, the more expensive the tree is going to be. But here's the flip side. So when I went on to look for prices, I looked at peaches and oranges. I thought maybe, you know, that's common stuff, right? They're 99 cents each. At 99 cents for each peach and each orange. It's like crazy to me that we would pay that much, right? But we do. That's how much it costs. But a tree, depending on age, maturity, if it's been pruned, what variety it is, this is all going to be very dependent. It can go anywhere from 10 pounds to 150 pounds of fruit that this tree produces in 1 year. 10 to 150 pounds. It's crazy that it's such a wide variety, but it does determine by variety. Like this peach tree is a tropical beauty. They create smaller peaches. I think this one is like 6 to 7 years old, so it is at the point where it's really at a high production. Last year I got between 60 and 75 peaches off of this tree. So you can see these trees pay for themselves in no time. And the other thing that's really cool about fruit trees is there's not a whole lot that you have to do in terms of cost. I give this fertilizer twice a year. The bag of fertilizer that I buy a big bag of Job's fruit and citrus. I use it on all my fruit trees, and I give it to them twice a year, like I said, and they all share it, and I've been using the same bag for like 2 years now. So that's all it needs. I prune it myself. I water it from my well. It's super cost effective. So if you have some room in your yard, definitely consider fruit trees. I have a whole video on how to grow them short. So a video on how to prune them so that you keep a short orchard, because I don't have a lot of room here, so that's what I have to do. And also a whole video on how to actually plant them when you get them. So now we are at number one, and I think that number one is going to surprise you a little bit because it's not really talked about, and that is perennial vegetables. So we do have a lot of perennial vegetables out there, like asparagus, or in the northern states you can grow artichokes. Down here we can grow pigeon peas. You know, this behind me right here is called a multiplier onion, and basically what it is it's a green onion that it multiplies. So I will show you up close here in a second, but you start with one green onion and it will split apart and start creating all of these other green onions. I was given these multiplier onions by a friend of the channel. She sent them to my P.O. box. I planted them, I think it was around last fall. She sent them and I planted them. And I've already split them twice. So they started growing. She sent me 3. Those 3, each one of them produced about 10 splits. So they had 10 different green onions. I split those apart and I took them inside and used them, and I put, I think, 5 back here. And those 5 split into 10 again, which caused them to become 50, 50 green onions. I split those apart and I put a bunch next to each, each one of my tomato plants that I'm growing this year, so that way I can try to keep some of the bugs away. So I'm using it as a companion plant. But based on the way that these guys split and multiply so quickly, I mean, it's already done it twice. And the first round was 30, the second round was 50, and now those 50 are going to produce 10 a piece. What is that, 500? I don't need 500 green onions, guys. That's in one, like, half a year, like one season. It is insane. The same happens with a lot of other perennial vegetables. Maybe they don't multiply or split apart like the multiplier onions, but like a pigeon pea is going to just keep growing bigger and bigger and producing more and more, kind of like a fruit tree. Or asparagus, it may take 3 years, but the patch is going to keep getting bigger and bigger and more dense, and you're going to be pulling off more asparagus. And these guys, if you pick perennial vegetables that are good in your area, you don't have to do anything for them. I do not feed this green onion. I don't feed my other perennial vegetables. I have a few leafy greens like CISO spinach and cranberry hibiscus and some of the other ones, you know, whether you describe that as an herb or a perennial vegetable. But I don't do anything to them. They don't get fed. They go straight into the native soil. This one went into the garden bed because I wasn't exactly sure what it needed. Now that I know how it behaves, it could go anywhere. Honestly, it does not care. It doesn't need to be fed. The thing barely needs to be watered. It is some of the easiest plants that you could possibly grow, and they just pump out food. I mean, crazy amounts of food for very little effort. It will pay for itself in one season. This is the #1 money-saving crop that you can grow. Thanks so much for hanging out with me today. If you have some other money-saving crops that you think the rest of the community should know about, make sure to head down into the comments and leave a note on which vegetable you think is the most money-saving in your garden. All right, happy gardening, guys.